I'll just do it again. Oh, no, we'll just do it just us, then. Quick, so we can just.
You can't see me smiling, or whatever it is that I'm like, I'm holding on.
Is this a brand new computer? Yeah. Okay, yeah, that would be good. Since we haven't been around for a while, I was gonna say it's probably all good. So cold. I know. Is that rose? What is that? That's gold. That's the new gold. They don't do rose gold, that sort of thing in the middle. No. Copper? Something.
Can you check and send the document to the right email? Can you? Okay. Can you forward that email to its tech support? Thank you.
Good morning. I am Jim Pedersen, President of Provo City School District Board of Education. It's my pleasure to welcome you this morning to our study session. It is Thursday, July 30th, 2020 at approximately 7:38 a.m. We'll begin this morning with a roll call. And Stephanie, let's begin with you.
Stephanie Bryant, Business Administrator. Jennifer Partridge, Board Member. Julie Rush, Board Member. Melanie Paul, Board Vice President.
Jim Pedersen, Board President.
Keith Patel, Superintendent.
Rebecca Nielsen, Board Member.
McKay Jensen, Board Member.
Nate Bryson, Board Member.
I would also like to welcome other members of council who are with us this morning and welcome those of you who have joined us via YouTube. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. We'll begin first with negotiated contracts, and Jason, we'll turn the time over to both you and Stephanie.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to be able to come and discuss with you our negotiated agreements with our different employee groups. I want to start off this morning by saying thank you to our different employee groups who were patient over the summer as we worked through the different financial items that were being handled at the state level, and we were working through how we could then support them. I want to also be able to take this opportunity from each of the groups to thank you to present in person and express her gratitude. With the uncertainty of all the things that have been going on, she went ahead and put that in writing, and I forwarded an email to you from her that expresses her gratitude on behalf of PEA and then personally for the work that you've done this year. I also want to take this opportunity to say thank you. I appreciate the hard work that you do. I know that our community has been very supportive of our employees, of our school system, and we want to say thank you to our community. Just to give a quick update, a brief update, our teachers, through the Truth in Taxation that has been noticed to our community, will receive each of them between a 10 and 11% increase, which again, they're very grateful for. This is in an effort to work to be competitive with other districts throughout the state, and we know that on their behalf, they're thankful for this work that's been done. It'll be an ongoing work that will continue with them, but again, there's a lot of gratitude there for the work that has been done in this year. Our administrative group and our classified employees, our PESP associations, have also wanted to make sure that we express gratitude from them. There was so much uncertainty this year as to where the finances would come in with the state and the federal government, on whether or not we would be able to have anything to offer to our employees, and each group is receiving an increase. All groups are receiving a step increase. For our administrative and classified association, the increase represents about a 3.5% increase. And again, I mentioned earlier that for our teachers, it is between a 10 and 11% increase for each of those employees. So I want to say thank you again for the work that you have done this year and wanting to support each of our employee groups. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions from the board for Jason?
I don't have a question, but please, I'm sure we'll all respond to Bailey.
You bet, I will absolutely.
For the work she's doing and the teachers.
You bet, I will make sure I express your gratitude for the work she's done and for all of our teachers for what they're doing for our students. So I'll make sure I pass that along.
And if I may, I'd like to point out that these negotiations conclude sometime in April and May. And so considering the fact that we're in July, there have been a lot of people that have remained patient and faithful and persistent on this. And so it hasn't been easy for Jason and Stephanie and their team. It hasn't been easy for PEA. I don't think it's been easy for anybody. But thank you to the board for your support. The teachers, they feel it, they're grateful for it, and it's a good step for this district. Thank you.
Any other comments anyone has? Jason, thank you, and Stephanie, thank you, and again, please relay our appreciation to our certified faculty for their willingness to work with us in these difficult times.
If I can just do a little bit of a clarifier. When you speak with your mic, you have the mic right up to your face because the mask is muffling a lot. So we're getting a little feedback that we're not being clearly heard.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to item number 4, the back to school plan. And I will turn the time over to Superintendent Raquel.
Thank you. So two weeks and 2 days ago, I made a presentation in a public board meeting about our return to school plan as it existed at that point. I mentioned that we were still working on a hybrid plan and that we would have that available this week. That plan is now before you for you to consider. Everybody's worn out, everybody's tired, everybody's worked to death. Teachers have been nervous, parents have been wanting answers, district and building administrators have been dealing with a changing landscape. I talked to McKay yesterday. He was in a meeting with the governor, and things are continuing to change throughout the state. So it has made this a very, very difficult process. But I did promise at that meeting on the 14th that we would have a hybrid model. The hybrid model is an option for the board to consider. It is one of essentially three overall models that we have before us that we can proceed with. And in all honesty, as conditions change, we will be in good shape having a variety of different models before us and choices. But we wanted to outline what that hybrid plan does look like. And I wanted to also point out to you that, to the public, that if you combine the results of the survey from the parents, that there was a question about, do you prefer part day? There was another question about, do you prefer a hybrid or blended model? If you take those two answers combined to the single largest response in favor, which was just somewhere between 45 and 50%. So this is in response not only to the promise I made to you, the board, and the public, but also to the results of the survey that we are trying to finally honor, or I should say, in fine, honor. We're now at a point where we have our models built, and we want to present this last one to you. So I want to thank my team for this. They have really gone out of their way to build this. Their first point of research was to contact probably 5 to 10 other districts in the state to figure out what they were doing and get ideas from them. So Todd McKee will make this presentation, and then there will be questions at the end.
Well, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to talk about the proposal before you. Before I get started, I want to take the opportunity to also thank a number of people. First and foremost, members of the board who have given us feedback and suggestions as we've gone along the way. I think it's also important for us to acknowledge and to thank all of our building administrators that have met a number of times on this plan to help us in terms of development. We've met with district personnel, all of our leaders of our different departments, nutrition, transportation, child services. We've met with all of our secondary counselors in reviewing this plan. We also met with the leadership of PEA and also with a group of teachers from across the district. And every group has provided insight and suggestions and improvements to the plan. I think that has helped us get to this point this morning. Before I delve into the plan, I just want to provide a little bit of context. It's been an unusual summer, as the superintendent has noted. There are many things that are known, but there's so much more that is still unknown. Well, we do know that in a couple of weeks, approximately 2 weeks, we'll be welcoming back into our city approximately 30,000 new residents as BYU and UVU starts their session. About that same time, we'll be inviting over 14,000 children from across the city to enter our schools after almost 6 months of quarantine or isolation. We do not know the impact that that's going to have on not just public health in our city, but the health of our schools. And so I think it's important for us to keep that in mind, that there's so much that's unknown. It speaks to the need to perhaps go cautiously and thoughtfully into this new school year. You know, there's a lot that we still don't know about this virus. It's still a novel virus. You know, at one point we were told that it was going to go away, that it was going to be seasonal. Well, we know that's not been the case so far. We were told that this primarily impacts the elderly, and in recent weeks we realized that's not the case, as the highest incidence across the country have been among young people. We were told that children do not get infected or are not necessarily spreaders of this disease. Well, even within the last week, there was a large study out of South Korea that suggests otherwise. It suggests that children over the age of 10 get infected and spread at the same rate as in adults. There's just so much that's unknown. Some things I think that are known, believing that we should be driven by experts in the field and by data, just like we would expect our teachers to be experts in the classroom and to be driven by data in terms of academics. We do know that currently the infection rate in Utah is rather high. Fortunately, the last couple of days we've seen the total incidence drop, and we're grateful for that. But we still have a positive rate of infection that's greater than 5%. And according to the CDC, it's the 5% is the indicator of how well we're controlling the infection rate in our community. I think it's interesting that Georgia Tech, the Department of Biostatistics, they have taken the infection rates across the country and they've gone county by county and put out some probabilities. And according to their probabilities, in a group of 25 or more in Utah County, it's better than a coin flip that somebody's going to be carrying the virus. That in a group as large as 75 in Utah County, it's over 76% probability that someone's carrying the virus. And then in a group of over 100 people in our county, it's almost assured that someone's carrying the virus. So again, I think it speaks to, for us going into the school year with so many unknowns, bringing all these children back into our buildings, that we need to be cautious and thoughtful. But also have the flexibility that as conditions change, and hopefully they change quickly, that we can adapt as well. That we can get back to some sense of normal school for our children, because we know on the flip side of this that children out of school is not healthy either. When we received this assignment from the superintendent, we looked at a number of things. As he mentioned, we looked at the survey very closely from the community and what their desires are. We also looked at several districts and their opening plans and tried to learn from their best thinking. In addition, we also looked at countries and schools that have already opened, and we tried to look and learn from those that have been very successful at doing so and those that have not been so successful to this point. And what we've learned is that in spite of all the precautions that you can put in, requiring masks, washing hands, keeping 6 feet apart, one of the keys for those that were very successful was making sure that you were able to reduce the number of students in the classroom. Now that's a challenge for us when you think about our largest school has over 2,300 students. How do you reduce that? So all of this went into the calculus and development of our plan. We readily admit that it's not necessarily perfect, that it's going to require a lot of monitoring and adjusting, but we're building systems to allow us to do that and to make decisions rather quickly. So I'll hit many of the highlights of this plan. First and foremost, it includes a phased opening. And by phased opening, what I mean is that we are requesting that for those students that want to return to in-person instruction, that we go on a 4-day early dismissal week, and that we cap the capacity of our buildings at 50%. That will require our administrators to set up a system that allows students to go on a kind of a rotation to keep our numbers low, and allow our teachers then to be able to work in a classroom that has far fewer students. I think about, again, our high schools and the number of students. It's not uncommon on a regular, in a typical situation, to have as many as 40 students in a classroom. And to try to mitigate the risk in that situation is going to be next to impossible unless we do something very different. And so a phased opening with a reduced capacity in our buildings I believe would be helpful for that. Now, the question is always, well, what happens for students? What are we doing for students that are not in class that particular day at their home? What we are developing in our plan is the opportunity then to continue to make progress and to continue with their academic growth by accessing teachers' Canvas websites. So what we're asking teachers to do is you'll have the opportunity to work with kids in the morning, but in the afternoons and on Fridays when students are not necessarily there, we're asking that teachers put a lot of effort and work into making sure that their Canvas websites contain all the learning and activities that we'd expect of students to make progress over the course of this year. This will allow a lot of flexibility for families and for students, and allow them to continue to make progress even when they're not in the buildings during this opening phase. As things progress, we're hoping that the conditions in the community improve and we get to the point where we can bring it back to full capacity in our buildings. That would be considered a phase 2. We request that we still remain on an abbreviated schedule to again allow our teachers to continue to work providing online activities and materials for students and responding to students' needs. I'll say a little bit more about the afternoons and Fridays here in a moment, but it's, in our view, it's very critical to do this if we're going to provide the maximum amount of flexibility for kids. At some point, we hope that we're going to get to a phase where we're going to get back to some sense of a new normal, where school is full day, every day of the week. But until we really have a better sense of the virus and its impact, we really are asking the board to consider this phased opening approach. Now, to the instructional approach to this. As I mentioned, students would have initially would have an abbreviated schedule, and then they would have the opportunity to continue to make progress accessing the teacher's website. Students actually have quite a bit of flexibility to choose this fall. One is, as the superintendent had presented 2.5 weeks ago, is students may have that choice to go fully online through eSchool. And so a student, whether they're in elementary, middle, or high school, will always have that opportunity to say, you know what, I don't want to worry about coming back to school, whether it's for the risk factor or some other family factor. I want to just go to online. We can accommodate that. We always have. We always will be able to do that. In elementary schools, elementary students, if they choose to do that, we have a program that we've had in place in the district for a number of years called K-12, and students would receive their curriculum through that program. For secondary students, there is a bit of a change for us in eSchool. And I know this has been somewhat of a conversation point in the community. We changed our curriculum provider this last year. And so this fall, we're excited to partner with BYU Independent Study to be the provider of our curriculum for eSchool, full-time eSchool this fall. This provides us a lot of flexibility in many different ways. Now, let me say just one more piece about the full online option. In addition to these programs that we've brought into the district, I think it's important to note that behind these programs, it will be a Provo City School District employee, a teacher, one of our teachers, that will be working with students on that curriculum. They'll be providing feedback and assessment, and that we're not relinquishing that much control over to either K-12 or to BYU Independent Study. Now I'll move on to in-person instruction. So as I mentioned, it would be a short schedule, and that we'd eventually want to ramp this up. There's a lot of expectation for our teachers, and I know they're anxious, but when I present it to them, they seem to welcome this idea that we would want them to move as much as possible to their Canvas. This again allows those students that are in person and on a shortened schedule to continue the progress,
But it also does this. It helps us with the third option, which is home study. So the scenario that I'll describe for you is say I have a student whose family is at high risk and they just don't feel comfortable coming back to school at the very beginning. Or I have a student that 2 weeks into the school year, someone in their family tests positive and they have to step out for 14 days to quarantine. The question has always been, what kind of flexibility do we provide for them, particularly if they're not interested in going over to e-school full-time? Because once a student makes that commitment to e-school, we're asking them to stay there for the entire grading period. We know that we have students that want more flexibility, that want to continue to be connected to our home schools. Well, this is where the in-person and the home study option work together. Because that, we've asked that teacher to continue to put their learning objectives and activities online. A student can step out into home study without an official declaration at any point and stay in that home study mode for as long as necessary as determined by the parent. So if they're anxious about the start, they can start right away with their teacher's work being posted on Canvas, and they can work from home. If a student tests positive or a family member becomes positive and they need to step out for 2 weeks, they have full access to all their teachers or their teacher on Canvas and can continue to make progress over those 2 weeks that they're out of the school. This is going to require a lot of flexibility on our teachers' part because it lends itself to students coming and going throughout the school year. So one day they may be in, one day they may be out. And that is the request that we have of them, is to have that kind of flexibility to understand that the circumstances are totally unusual for us this next year. But we believe this will help us stay connected to students and help them continue to make progress. Let me say a little bit more about the afternoons and Fridays for teachers. Hopefully you can start to see that there is time that's going to be needed for teachers to work together, to collaborate, and to adjust their curriculum to ensure that we have some consistency across schools and across the district in what we're posting online.
The afternoons would be provided for that. In addition, the Fridays would be important for this as well. In addition to that, I would say that for those students that are in that kind of home study, that they're obviously going to have questions and need to interact with their teacher while they're still at home. The afternoon and Friday time would be available for teachers then to interact via email or if they choose to through Zoom with these students that are still in this home study mode.
So again, we believe this time is critical because teachers are going to be balancing many things this fall, not just their in-class instruction, but also how they're getting things ready for online and then also responding to student needs. I do want to say though, it's critical to understand is that the expectation at this point is that we don't want our teachers to think that they have to plan to teach in person and then teach on top of that online. We're really trying to make this more clear that it's what we call an asynchronized world, where then we're not expecting them to teach in person and then turn around and bring all their students together in a live session online and provide a whole new instruction for them. We're asking them, though, to be responsive to student needs, but not necessarily to double their workload, ask more of them than we would otherwise. And I think it's important to understand that we learned very clearly from the spring that the practice of teaching in person is very different than the practice of teaching online. And so this is going to help us, I believe, in many regards down the road. Now, what is this going to require of us going forward? I think there are at least 3 things that we've identified as needs, and I'm sure there are many, many others. But first, we have to let go of our compulsory attendance of policy. We have a policy that's very strict about the number of days that students may be out. We've attached consequences, in some cases, recognitions for kids for good attendance. We have to let go of that this year. I think that's critically important because the last thing we want to do is create a system of either sticks or carrots that requires that where a student is sick and feels like they're obligated to be in our schools in person. We want to be able to provide for them and have flexibility for them through our home study option so they're not put in that dilemma. And so we have to think about attendance a little bit differently. I also believe that we're going to have to look, much like we did in the spring, we're going to have to look at grading a little bit differently. And where I would suggest to our teachers and our administrators and to you, the board, is that we start to look more at how we assess to the standards, that we become more standards-based in our assessment of kids and reporting of kids of how they're doing. But I believe that's something we need to consider. The other requirement or need of us is resource. Many of our teachers, we've learned, are fabulous in the online world. They did an incredible job. All of our teachers did an incredible job in the spring trying to get ready for the challenge that we faced in just 2 days. But we also recognize that for some of our teachers, that was a learning curve that was rather steep. They're just not familiar with online. And so the more resource and more time that we can provide for them to get acquainted with online and improve their skills there and how they interact with kids, I think would be a great benefit to us. It will force us to look at perhaps how we use our time before the school year starts. When teachers do come back to the district and they start contract, we typically have a number of days for professional development. I think it would behoove us to allow that time to be used by them to really get together with their colleagues and look at how are we going to get ready for this online environment. Now, the advantages to this plan that we see, first and foremost, flexibility for families. The parents are empowered to determine when it's safe for their child to come back to school. And we embrace that. It provides us some flexibility in how we work with teachers. I think what's lost a lot in the conversation is that we have many of our teachers who are in that high-risk category. And we owe it to not just our students, but also to them to make sure we keep them safe and healthy this year. This will provide us some flexibility on how we are able to work with their needs. It provides an opportunity for that day, if it does come, when we have to dismiss the entire district because of the spread of the virus, that all of our teachers are better prepared to move online if we have to. And I stress, if we have to. We don't see that. We hope that's not the case. But it's better to be prepared now. I would say that, in addition, we are working very closely with technology to help support this. We intend to be able to provide Chromebook to every child this fall. Unlike the spring, where it was somewhat hit and miss and it was based off more about need, this year we are fully capable to go one-to-one with Chromebooks. And I think that's a big bonus and advantage for us. In addition, we also recognize that as much as we have an academic need with students this fall, we probably have as much or more of a social and emotional need with students. And so part of our thinking and planning, and I know I've had a conversation with a number of principals, is that how can we use district resources as well as school-based resources to make sure we stay engaged. Our two priorities going into this plan, the first was health and safety, the second was student engagement. And I know that in student services, under the direction of Dr. Finch, he's looking at his team, his attendance trackers and social workers, and developing plans of how we can still stay engaged with students, and particularly to watch for those students that are staying home under the home study plan, so that we can engage them and continue to seek out and support their needs. I know that our building principals are looking at their homeroom and advisory as an opportunity, perhaps on a Friday morning, to ask teachers simply to do a check-in with kids through Zoom. So all along the way, I want to emphasize that we're trying to find ways to stay connected, engage students. You know, that I believe hopefully one of our objectives at the end of this year is that we find that our students still retain that love of learning, that they still love school. And so engagement and engaging with them is going to be critical. Now, we also recognize, and I apologize for playing with my mask, I know that's not good, but it keeps sliding down as I talk, so forgive me on that. I'm not modeling good mask behavior right now. But I just wrap up by saying we recognize that there's shortcomings with this. We may not be able to meet everyone's need. And we recognize on the other side of this, there are families that really depend upon us for a number of services. And to go to a shortened schedule at the very beginning will be impactful on them. And we acknowledge that. I think what I would close by saying is, given the unusual times that we face and the challenges that we face, that we all have to bear a little bit of burden. That there's a little bit of sacrifice for all of us in this. You know, I think it was yesterday in the Salt Lake trip, I came across a quote from one of those wonderful members of our greatest generation that sacrificed so much. And the suggestion was, I hope this isn't the least generation. I don't believe that's the case. I believe we can step up and meet the challenges just like our family did previously to the challenges that they faced years ago. We are in one of those moments. Whether people have been touched by the virus and recognize it or not, we're in one of those moments. And I'm confident that we as a district can be a support to our families and our communities. And this is one way we can do it, is through this proposal. I'll entertain questions at this point.
Todd, maybe just a minute as we prepare to get started with questions. I wanted to express to you my gratitude for not only you and the others on the superintendent's leadership team, the superintendent. You know, a few weeks ago, we gave you a unique challenge to prepare a plan for in-person opening, and you did that. And then we came back and said, now we want you to give us a plan for a hybrid. We realized that that created some uncertainty in the minds, perhaps, of some of our district patrons. It's been hard. We're dealing with situations where things are constantly in flux and constantly changing. And I'm appreciative of the fact that with enthusiasm, everyone has pitched in and sought to find the most proactive way to deal most appropriately with the current needs. I also want to express my gratitude and thanks, and I share the mask issue, for those of our patrons who have taken the time to thoughtfully email us and to share their heartfelt feelings and to make suggestions. And I'm sure that part of your plan was based on input we received from patrons and our questions. And I'm appreciative of that, because that allows us all to work together collaboratively, not only as the school board, the district administration, but also as patrons and those who receive the services that we provide. And so, thank you. I would also maybe like to say that this is a great starting point. I think there will undoubtedly be some additional revisions and changes that come, some modifications as the situation continues to evolve. And I appreciate your flexibility, your sensitivity, and your willingness to be open to those changes that will in the future need to be made in order for us to deliver a quality education to everyone that we serve in the Provo City School District. And with that brief introductory set of remarks, Board, questions do you have for Dr. McKee?
I have some. First, I just want to also just say thank you as well. In talking to some of the district council, it has been expressed to me that this has been a summer like no other.
and I absolutely believe it. So I appreciate the massive amount of work that has gone on in the district this summer to come up with this plan. You mentioned that we cannot satisfy everyone, and I believe this is a very, very good compromise. But I know there is one group of parents that are going to be very anxious, and those are the parents that want their kids in school all day, every day. So my question is, I know we cannot predict how this virus is going to go and what the health of the community is going to be at any certain point in time. But despite that, do you have any sort of set of indicators that will help us know when we're going to be able to move from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3? Is there a certain number of cases, or are we just going to take that kind of day by day?
That's an outstanding question that we've been kicking around for the last couple of weeks. How are we going to monitor and make decisions going forward? You know, what we've done is build structures to help us with that. We have a district safety committee. We've had one for the last couple of years, and typically it would meet once a month, and we'd look at broader safety issues. That group has been retasked this fall. We'll meet daily at the beginning of the year with the primary focus on how do we respond to the needs in our schools and our community in regards to the opening of the virus. We're fortunate that we have the director of all the school nurses in the county that is accepted to sit on that committee with us. So we'll have some expertise at the table with us to help make those decisions. I would suspect, and I can only speak for myself, I can't speak for the committee, but again, I go back to what experts have said, the CDC and others, around the best indicator for containing the virus is the positive rate, that rolling 7-day positive rate in the community. And it seems to be that it's 5% is the threshold. So that may be a starting point for us. I'm sure there are a multitude of indicators that we're going to need to be looking at. The most important thing, though, is that we have a process in place to do that, and hopefully to do that very quickly and expeditiously with a daily meeting and a response to what's going on in our buildings.
I can probably also, add that we are working very closely with the health department generally. I have another meeting this afternoon with them, and those meetings are becoming more and more frequent. And those meetings are also involving the 2 other superintendents who we talk about. So it's regular coordination of our information, our data, etc. And we're getting good direction from the health department.
I appreciate that. I left it to be implied, but the director of all the school nurses is part of the county health department. So we'll have that direct connection with them daily, as well as the superintendent's interaction with them throughout the meeting.
Thank you, Tom. I have one more quick question. This is not on a grander scale, but I've had a lot of people ask me about recess for elementary school. I didn't see that on my final plan. Are kids going to have to wear masks at recess or reduce time at recess? Or what?
That's an excellent question, and I know that my partner in crime, Alex Judd, who's working with the elementary, is working very closely with principals on how we do that in all regards. In all regards, it's looking at the direction we're receiving from the health department to maintain the safety of children, safe distance when you can't maintain that 6 feet, masks required, personal hygiene. But we also have been informed that a mask is needed if you're within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. So we continue to get updated advice, and that's going to inform our directions and our decisions around recess and other large group meetings.
I have a question just a couple of points that I know that the health department will look at that. That the positive test rate is one of theirs. They also look at the cases per 100,000. And they're trying to get to 75. We're at 138 today. But it's that rolling average that they look at. And then they also look at the percentage of spread. So they measure that as how many people, if you're positive, how many people are you likely to give it to?
Over the past couple of weeks, it has been, 1.7. So in other words, the numbers were going up. The last 3 days, it's been 9.4, or 0.94, so it's starting to go down. And those are the three numbers that they're using to make sort of broad, that the state health department is telling their local health departments to look at. But we're currently above the 5% infection rate, or positive test rate in 75 cases per 100,000. Will this be a bi-week decision? So we'll say this week is going to be, we're in this phase. Is that correct?
Appreciate that question. And as we've considered that and what we would recommend to the board, we recognize that our families depend on consistency. They need some type of consistency in our calendar and our times so that they can plan for their families. We know that teachers also welcome consistency as well. And in our thinking is that we recommend that phase one go through at least the first grading period, the first quarter, with the added flexibility as our safety committee meets, and we get direction from the health department or advice from the health department, that we look at that and can always ask to curtail that back. I think it's always going to be easier to loosen up the restrictions and invite more kids in than it will be to go the other direction. So I'd rather be somewhat cautious again and have people plan on at least that first quarter with that possibility that if things continue to improve as they have over the last week, that we can get into that phase two much more quickly.
So you're asking, will
First
be
9 weeks.
2 days a week basically for students till October, is that correct?
That's correct.
But not necessarily.
With the option that we can always ramp up faster. Yes.
And how often will we make that evaluation?
We're going to, again, that's something that we take to that safety committee, and they're going to meet every day through the first 2 or 3 weeks at least, and probably beyond.
Great. I think...
McKay, can I also just add, board, I think there's a possibility that we maybe have to call some emergency meetings between now and the beginning of the school year. As you know, things are continuing to change very rapidly, and it's swinging all over the place. So there may be some need to address other options that could come before us, especially if they're trending throughout Utah. So I just need to put you on notice that we may have to do that at some point. Right now, we're not planning another meeting until the 11th of August, but it's possible, for example, that we may need to call some meetings between this time. So just be advised. Thank you.
I don't think we can cut you off, but I have something I want to say kind of along the same lines that you were just talking about. I think we also need to be mindful that the numbers McKay was talking about, state averages, right?
County.
The state.
County.
Okay. County.
Specific to the county.
Counting averages, so that's great, but I think we also need to know that Provo, specifically West Provo, is a hot spot. Our numbers are significantly higher than state averages for sure, but even county averages. And so those decisions, I would hope, are going to be made based on what's happening from Provo. Obviously, the county health department is really involved, but I was shocked to learn that West and Southwest Provo, we're double what Eastside Provo even is. And Eastside Provo is significantly higher than other areas. So we have some extra challenges. I think everybody's kind of aware of it. Those that aren't aware of it, I would encourage you to be mindful of that as you make these decisions, and that we aren't, as you already pointed out, too eager to relax restrictions, only to find out. We've seen the lines going up and down, seeing decreases, and then it goes right back up. So
the response to that, I appreciate you saying that, because the state has really good data that has actually broken down our city into 3 parts. West Provo and East Provo, and we have kind of the North BYU section of it. And zero in with that level of detail on how, where are we in terms of the outbreak. That is very helpful to understand. We'll be collecting similar kind of data from our schools, and again, the health department is there to help us along the way. I think to your point though, to Julie, simply opening the doors to our schools is not really the challenge. That's rather simple. The real challenge for us is ensuring and making sure that they stay open. That we are able to continue to provide a full year for students, even if the beginning is somewhat abbreviated. To rush in with all these unknowns and constant changing, there's just this fear that we're going to create serious problems for students and teachers and families by creating an outbreak. And so again, I think there's prudence in going slow.
So I appreciate there's a good process that goes along. How do we deal with all these things, moving in and out and being flexible? Tell us a little bit about the specifics of if a teacher, tests positive on a weekend.
Yep.
What is our staffing like? How do we maintain continuity? I know that the health department will sort of determine the contact tracing and how far that goes and how many numbers of people they need to be informed, and we'll try and be as transparent as that. But what's our staffing, or how are we being prepared for the district continuity?
I know that Jason Cox is working very diligently on this. He's meeting with our substitute provider to ensure that we have that kind of coverage this fall. In addition, I can say that we started that conversation about 2 weeks ago with principals to identify ways to address when a teacher has to step out of the classroom. We've had means to do this in the past. We've had subs shortages in the past, and we expect that that's not going to change. In fact, it may even be worse. So we likely are going to lean heavily on the company that provides our subs, as well as finding other ways to support students in the buildings when teachers have to step out. And we do have staff within buildings, some limited staff, that can step in on a moment's notice. I believe that one of the flexibilities that are built into this is that online portion where the teacher's materials are in campus. Students will always have access to that. And so whether, depending on how broad the spread is and how impactful, it's not unrealistic for us to see a class or a school or a portion of the city move to online if circumstances warrant.
So I just want to say thank you overall. Just maybe for point of interest, to let you know how, so I appreciate this plan as being flexible. I also appreciate this plan in giving space for teachers that we're beginning to address their workload and their safety. I know in the meeting I was in yesterday, it was a lot of anxiety. It was a lot of addressing the statement, the request from UEA, and their anxiety for the teachers, because we haven't been talking about teacher safety very much, because school systems are not designed to speak from places where the ground should be. And so information has sort of been held, and not to confuse the teachers, but we always want to tell the public things that are solid, and this sort of addresses, gets us to a solid place as far as we're being flexible. We're sort of embracing this change that we have to be flexible, and I appreciate that. I see that the abbreviated schedule is very difficult, particularly for our district and our demographics, particularly for working families. It's very difficult. But I don't know any other way to address the skills that will be needed. This will not be a new school year, and I know we want to hang on to all our last practices, but I still think it's a reasonable goal not to have any transmission in our schools. But that takes skills, new skills that our teachers have to learn. And all the districts up and down the Wausau Train are grappling with this. Jordan announced a 1-week delay reporting. Iron County is a 2-week delay. Davis County has gone through an abbreviated schedule just within this week because they're changing, because they're worried about that these skills, because like you said, Georgia Tech says, basically if you go into a school, for 2 days in a row, there's a 100% chance you'll be exposed. But none of our educators, particularly, are expendable, and exposure does not mean transmission, but to prevent that transmission takes skills and practice. And so providing room for us to get those skills and practice is really important, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Two comments I just want to make in response. First and foremost, our greatest investment, our greatest resource are our teachers. And I think that's noted by the board's willingness in this last negotiation to invest in them. It's incumbent upon us to protect their health. And secondly, the suggestion about having a goal that may seem lofty to some about zero transmission in our schools, it has been done. It has been done in schools that have opened up in other countries. But they had systems around them where they were very mindful about the spread of the disease in the community first, and then exercised precautions much like we're taking in terms of reduced class sizes or loads on buildings, lots of hygiene and protective measures that way. It is possible. I believe we can reach that goal of zero transmission. But again, it's going to come back to a willingness on everyone's part, not just in the district and in our schools, but in our community, to sacrifice a little, believing that that's a goal that's worth achieving.
I have a couple questions. So I know a lot of concerns from parents relate to not being in school full-time, but a lot of students struggled last time without being in school. Even the ones who were really trying, a lot of them struggled. Can you speak to how it might be different with them being in school a couple days? What do we see as, what are the supports going to be to help these students while we are in a 2-day-a-week, that it will look different for them than it did in the spring?
That's an excellent question, and let me start by saying this: it's not pretending to be an excuse by any means, but this is what I call adaptive change, meaning this is something that's never been done before. We don't have models to look at and to lean on and learn from. We can see what others have tried to that have gone before us, but they're just months ahead of us, right? Your question is an excellent one, and while I don't have a ready answer to say this is definitively what we're going to do, I do know that we have talked about the process to achieve that. And the best way to achieve that is to bring our teachers together, particularly before the school year starts, as teams to collaborate around that with that ultimate goal. How do we engage kids? How do we make sure they stay engaged? That's our second priority in the plan, right after health and safety, is student engagement. And we have so many students that are dependent upon us. How do we meet their needs? This limited start to the school year. How do we address the needs of the most at risk? And that has to be front and center in our thinking in our schools and our planning with our teachers as we go into this year. And that's why I appreciate even now the thinking, not just in student services under Doug Finch's direction with social workers, but our principals are engaging in this conversation about, okay, what are the systems that I can start to put in place? A high school talking about, hey, can I take my advisory and put it in on a Friday? I know it's going to be a Zoom or online session, but how can I continue to connect with students? And it's going to take that kind of creative thinking overall, I think, to achieve what you're asking for.
I'd just like to add that I believe there would be additional training coming this summer for teachers, that they'll feel even more comfortable and more capable than they did last year. That should help engagement and all the other teaching effectiveness as we go into this next session.
Just as a follow-up to what you were just talking about with these at-risk students, are any of the options, will they be able to get breakfast and lunch?
Yes. So we worked in every day, breakfast and lunch for those that need it. When they're not in school that day, for instance, perhaps they're off rotation, it would be a pickup similar to what we practiced in the spring and summer. But that was part of our planning with nutrition services to make sure that we are able to meet those needs for families.
So they would basically be able to take 2 lunches home? Like if they come on Monday, because they would come back on a Tuesday, they would get 2 lunches, so they get that lunch, or do they have to go back?
You know, the exact method of how they're going to do that, I know they've doubled around in the past. It may be that they show up on Monday, they get served on Monday, and then they simply need to come back, kind of like a drive-through on Tuesday to get picked up as well. But one way or the other, we're ensuring that families will get those meals.
And another big concern for me with this is a lot of these kids may or may not have internet. Do we have a way to help provide it? And in fact, it's mostly going to be online with this model.
Thank you for that question, because that was one of our big concerns coming out of the spring experience, holiday experience. First I'll go back to this year, this fall, we're ensuring that every child gets a Chromebook, so we're number one. Now, your question is now, what good is the Chromebook if you don't have connectivity? I know that under the leadership of Teaching and Learning, Anne Marie and Doug in Student Services, they've been working with Google Fiber and with the city to identify the families that don't have that connectivity, and then two, I believe Google has given a generous donation to the district to help support whether it's hotspots or connections to the homes. So we have some plans already, and we'll continue to work on plans to make sure that students have connection to the internet.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. To me, it all comes down to the question of how valuable is time with the teacher, because that's what we have to compare it to. And by doing this plan, I think one of the board members told me we're going to reduce time in front of the teacher by 70%. And for some kids, that's okay. They do well. But as we saw last spring, for a lot of kids, that's tough. I saw something by McKinsey that says that some minority groups, if they do online school, their lifetime earnings is going to be reduced by $2,000 per year. There's other things like the AAT. They say that suicides and mental health issues and child abuse, all those things, they go up. Our DLI programs are not going to work. Really, when they're only in front of a teacher 30% of the time that they normally would be. And we have to compare that with, okay, how much benefit are we getting by having just half the kids? I know that that's what a lot of different countries are doing and a lot of different districts are doing, but do we have a quantitative measure on how much improvement that is in reduction of the risk? The AAP, they said that if people are wearing masks, it doesn't really matter if you're 3 feet or 6 feet. And I don't know where they got that from even. And so I'm just worried about the cost of doing this. And when we started this, we were going to create a hybrid option to supplement our full day option. But when we got the plan a couple days ago, we got rid of the full day option entirely, and we were just doing a hybrid. And so we've been defending the one option the entire time, and we've been talking about it and discussing it and showing the merits of it, and now to just have it switched. And I get the reasons. there's also a lot of benefits to having kids in class. And I just can't help but think that the students are essential, and we have a lot of people in the economy who, you know, like grocery clerks, people at Home Depot, nurses, doctors, and they go and they put themselves at risk for a higher cause. And I just feel like education is worthy of that.
I appreciate the comment and the question. When you take it all the way down to the bare essence of this, what you're asking is, what's the cost benefit to this? Right?
Yeah.
You know, what's the benefit to reduce, given the cost that students are out of school more than they would otherwise? You know, it's a fundamental question that went into all of our thinking and planning around this. We don't want students to be out of school longer than they need to be. And that's why we look at the, you know, and saying that, we also know, as you know, someone noted, things are so fluid and they're changing, and there's still a lot that's unknown. And the research that comes, the purported research that comes out one day seemingly changes the next. And so it's looked for us, it was looking at, okay, what has been successful, that's proof in the pudding, so to speak. Those that have been successful, what did they do? And is it possible for us to create a short-term phase-in process that allow us to get off the ground, to get a start to the year, that we can quickly ramp up as we see the conditions change in the positive? So we're not suggesting or purporting that this phase one is a long-term plan. I hope it's not a long-term plan. That's not our expectation. We only suggest the first quarter simply for consistency's sake. But all along, we'll be monitoring and adjusting, and we're hoping to ramp this up as quickly as possible. But we need to be driven by, I believe, the best information we have at that moment, knowing that that information continues to change.
Well, what changed from 2 weeks ago? I mean, the numbers 2 weeks ago were worse than they were yesterday. Things were trending worse 2 weeks ago than they were yesterday when I last looked. Why did we switch our thinking from having all the kids in school to having them in 30% of the time?
You know, that's a very fair question. I'll say that we did our very best under the directions that we were given and what we thought we were hearing from the board, the community, and others, from our state leaders about getting kids into school full time. And so what we tried to do in that initial plan is try to create as safe of a plan as possible, trying to meet the needs of everybody, but also recognizing that the conditions may not warrant it. And so once we were given, after that meeting, some direction to look at some more flexibility, I think we've landed in a place that it meets the situation more.
Well, have we given any consideration to maybe separating elementary schools between middle schools and high schools? I know that there's been a lot of studies. Bill Gates came out and said yesterday that elementary kids should probably just be going to school every day with full schedules because they're not as at risk. I think you even mentioned it yesterday. People who are younger, and that would also help our DLI programs. Have we thought about separating those two?
Certainly. I mean, even the New England Journal of Medicine yesterday published an article that relied on that study out of that very large, rigorous study out of South Korea that was saying kids 10 and younger, not that they don't get infected or that they don't spread, but they don't seem to get infected or spread as much as older students and adults. You know, that's new information for us. And so we're looking at that very closely, and what does that curtail for us? But the fact of the matter is we're just a matter of weeks from the beginning of the school year. And the system, our teachers, our families, all of our support staff are just been hanging on what is the plan. Can you give us some direction? And so again, hopefully the plan is flexible enough that as we start to move forward, we can take this new information that's just now coming out. You know, the Korean study is only a week old. That we can start to maybe look at that differently. And the plan allows for that kind of flexibility. But our system, our school district needs to get moving forward in a direction and can continue to change the plan on them. I think does a disservice for us. We will not be prepared for the start of the school year if we continue to change the plans.
But I think that one of the challenges that we face, one of the biggest challenges we face, is that every day somebody comes out with a new piece of either opinion or data or research or something. And honestly, we can't adjust that fast. We've got to build in transportation answers. We've got to build in food service answers and safety and cleaning processes and on and on and on. I think there are people who may think that you can just, shift your plan within an hour. We can't. We're a big system, and we're trying to respond. I've been kind of cynically saying that, we can almost guarantee that this particular plan that's before us right now may well be obsolete before the time the school year begins, because things continue to change, and social pressures continue to come on us. I believe everybody's aware of the pressures that have come from national teacher organizations with people being concerned about, and again, it was one of our concerns as well, about returning teachers into the classroom, especially if they're older, or especially if they have, as we know they do, potentially a heightened rate of exposure. So the 50% approach is one way to address that. It's not a perfect approach. In fact, bottom line is I don't have a perfect answer for this, and I will guarantee 41 other school districts in the state don't either. So what we tried to do was build in a model that would allow the board to be able, and the district to be able to move between different scenarios. And I mean, the big plan that we unveiled 2 weeks ago, that's not going to get tossed. We still have that because the day will come that we can return to more of a green setting, and that will have to be our guide. But for now, the project was to develop a plan that would give a different alternative, a different way of delivering the system. And again, responding to a significant number of requests in the community about us potentially at least looking at considering a hybrid model like this. So it's not, there's no perfect answer on this, and this was just an attempt to fulfill a potential option, providing an option for our people.
Okay, I just want to make the point that our current plan is everyday school. So it's not like we're changing, we're asking to change the plan from here forward. That's what we're all going to vote on. So if we were to vote no, the current plan would be in place already to go to school every day.
Yes.
We kind of exceeded our allotted time for the study session. There is more discussion that needs to take place. We can continue that discussion in our business meeting. And so I would propose that we continue the discussion on item 4 in our business meeting, and also address items 5 and 6. Is there a motion to adjourn study session?
So moved.
Motion was by Board Member Hall. Is there a second?
I second that.
Okay. Let's move on into our business meeting then. We will begin, sit up, please. We'll wait just a minute until we transition to the new YouTube channel for the business meeting. And so let's take